Hey, Brian from SnakeBytes here. Have you ever wondered what an Australian reptile show is like? Well, this week I'm going to travel down to Ipswich, Australia to the Scales and Tails Festival. You're watching SnakeBytes. All right, so these have always been one of my favorite animals. These are Australian frill dragons. They call them frillies, and they're really an amazing animal, mainly because they're known for this really big frill right here. Just look at that. Now, typically animals are in captivity quit frilling up, but they certainly use this as a defense mechanism. When a predator comes up, it looks way bigger when it frills that big frill up. I tell you, these guys are mainly arboreal animals. You can see they're meant for climbing the way they can just hang on like that, and they're completely carnivorous. I tell you, this is one cool animal that traveled all the way to Australia to see. How many miles did Brian travel on his recent Australian adventure? A, 22,000 miles, B, 27,000 miles, or C, 32,000 miles? Go ahead and answer down below in the comments and check back later in the show to see if you had the correct answer. For this week's Reptile Report Spotlight, we'll be highlighting boa constrictors. Go ahead and check out the URL down below or click on the link in the description. Of course, Australia has some incredible carpet pythons, and my buddy Troy probably has the sickest collection out there. This happens to be an incredibly gorgeous Brittle's jag, but I tell you what, I've never seen one like this before. That just rich caramel and almost hypo looking to it is truly amazing. I tell you what, this is a beautiful snake. Now this animal here has one more gene than the Brittle's jag, and it's a hypo-Brittle's jag. Now the hypomelanistic gene is a recessive gene, but it just really lightens it up. Again, the hypo is lacking a little bit of the melanin, but it's not an albino yet, so it just makes that really rich, caramely look to it. Man, I tell you what, this is gorgeous. What we have here is an albino Darwin's carpet, but this isn't just a normal albino. It obviously has all of this black smudging on it, and that's called a paradox. Now what's interesting with some paradox is the fact that one eye will be albino and one eye will be normal, and that's exactly what this animal has, which makes it really interesting. Now unfortunately, the majority of paradox albinos are not genetic, but we don't know yet with the carpet, so let's hope that there'll be some more paradox albinos in the future. Out of all the carpet pythons here, this one really caught my eye, mainly because it was so different looking and that head pattern was so incredible. Now this animal happens to be a hypo-caramel Brittle's jag, so there's a lot of genes going on and a couple recessives as well, so it's really difficult to produce an animal that's this rare and this exotic. It certainly is an incredible looking snake. You guys may remember last year when I was down in Australia, I got kind of owned by an olive python. Well, guess what? This happens to be that exact olive python. Now this year, kind of something interesting happened. I can't quite get away from it. It's kind of got me. But the good news is that its head is right here, so it's not biting me. But I'll be honest with you, I have no idea how I'm going to get this little bugger off. Oh, here we go. Ooh. Now I might be in trouble because I completely have no way of getting this animal. Now olive pythons are really beautiful snakes, and this happens to be a het for albino. Now I don't want people to think that olive pythons are typically mean animals. What's happening here is both times I've been down here, it's right after breeding season, so this particular animal has just laid eggs, so she's really aggressive for food, and she's going to pretty much attack anything. But down the road, when she gets beefed back up, she's really going to be a sweetheart, or at least that's what I'm told. This guy just finished breeding, so it's a little bit feisty. And we're gonna see what we got. Oh. Now, albino olive pythons are absolutely gorgeous snakes. Oh. Look at that snake right there. Wow. And you gotta be careful because they are face biters. So you gotta be really gentle with it. But right now, I'll be honest with you, it seems completely tame. Now, Troy assured me that this animal was gonna bite me, but I don't see anything happening right now. I tell you what, oh, you can see it starting to coil up now. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. This is gonna hurt, guys. Oh, gosh. Yeah, well, I guess what? So anyways, okay, so let me talk a little bit about albino olive pythons. They really come on the scene only in the last several years. And this one is definitely a little bugger. but it's not constricting me like the one that got me last year. But again, what you don't want to have happen is this thing to get close to your face, because a face bite by one of these guys is pretty gnarly. And again, a lot of the albino olive pythons have been a little bit dicey when it comes to their fertility, so there's not a whole lot of them out there. These guys can get pretty big. This guy's only probably about 2/3 grown. And hey, I tell you what, a little love like this, I'm not complaining, because after last year it was really difficult. But I'm going to go ahead and see how Troy fares with the animal that got me last year. Look at it, it's a puppy dog too.
Yeah, this one was Brian's friend's friend.
Oh,
guys.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a good one too.
Yeah, I can feel that. I can feel both top jaw and bottom jaw in there.
Oh, let me help you out here.
Sure.
Let's take a look at that one. Oh, I got to get that on film.
Yeah, usually your olives are a pretty tame sort of an animal. These guys here, it's into the breeding season. So this girl, she's just finished laying her eggs. She's it's all food response, pretty hungry. As soon as we get the condition back on this girl, she will calm right back down. She will be nice and placid. Brian just has perfect timing.
Well, I'm loving it. You want me to help you get this thing off?
Yeah.
Now, I'm a complete monitor nut, and there's no place better on the earth to be in Australia to see such amazing animals. This happens to be a Bell's phase lace monitor. Now, it's actually a naturally occurring mutation, so to speak. When you breed a Bell's to a normal lacy, you're going to get some variations of Bell's. Sometimes they'll look just like this, and sometimes it'll just be a tail that has that Bell's phase. Essentially, all it is these big bands like that. Now, lace monitors are truly cool animals, and when they get big, they're pretty formidable. But this guy is a real cutie. The thing I really love about him is take a look right on the top of his head. He has a little heart pattern. Now that's pretty cool. Now this is a truly awesome thing for a reptile person. This is a baby parenti monitor. Now this happens to be the largest species of guana in Australia, maxing out at about 3 meters. That's one really big lizard. They're endemic to the southern part of Northern Territory and Western Queensland, more in the arid desert areas, but they're also relatively tame animals, which makes them a little bit dodgy, because when they get big and you trust them and they rail into you, you're gonna be hurting. But wow, just take a look, just holding something like this. Man, it's so awesome. Now this is one beautiful monitor. It's one of the bigger monitors in Australia. It's a Spencer's monitor, and they get about 1.5 meters long. You can certainly just look at how beautiful that animal is. But whenever I'm handling monitors, the one thing I always know is just how strong they are, and those claws can really dig into you. These guys are definitely one of the cooler monitors I've seen. I love all of the Morelia, but certainly my favorite of all of them happen to be the Carinata, or rough-scaled python. Now these guys were once thought to be extinct, believe it or not, and it wasn't until probably about 15 years ago before they were rediscovered. Now what's really interesting is now they're relatively prevalent and relatively cheap, and they've even made it their way over to America. Eventually, I gotta own some of these guys. Now I've worked with a lot of carpet pythons over the years. These guys are just so different because their typically attitudes are a little different, and it's so cool because they have this really rough scale to them. Obviously why they're named rough scale pythons. The first time I ever handled one of these guys, I got completely destroyed. They happen to have one of the largest teeth of all non-venomous snakes, but I was so excited to be handling it, I could barely even feel the bites. This guy is puppy dog tame. It seems like almost every table I walk by, there's an amazing snake to look at, but I tell you what, this one really caught my eye. This is a 75% jungle jag. You can see it's kind of lining my face up, so I have to be a little bit careful. But just look at that pattern, that jaguar coming through, making it super reduced. It's just truly amazing. I've always been a huge diamond python fan, but this happens to be the favorite one I've ever seen. So many diamond pythons have tons of yellow with all kinds of freckling. This happens to be a black and white one, and the whitest one that I've ever seen. What's interesting about diamond pythons compared to carpet pythons, they come from a much cooler climate. Believe it or not, you'll sometimes find these guys outside when it's almost freezing temperatures. Scrub pythons are really cool animals. As a matter of fact, I often call them face biters, but this guy is completely tame. And the reason I call them face biters is for whatever reason, scrubbies with attitude seem to always come right up at your face and strike at you. Now this guy is pretty big, maybe about 4 or 5 foot, but it's just a little pup. Believe it or not, these guys can get 14 or 15 foot, so they're really a force to be reckoned with when they're mean. But I tell you what, you don't see a lot of scrubbies around. They are one beautiful snake, and as babies, they are so colorful, probably one of the prettiest pythons out there. There's really 2 species of crocodiles in Australia, and certainly the salties are the ones that do most of the damage. This happens to be the other species. They call them freshies, and they have really slender snouts, and you can see those really super sharp teeth. These guys are predominantly fish eaters, so they're not really man eaters, but it's still gonna get really large, and it's a formidable crocodile for sure. But this little guy is just too cute. Well, you certainly can't come to Australia and not handle one of their most deadly elapids. This happens to be a tiger snake, and you can certainly see why it's called it with their banding like this. It's in the top 10 most deadly snakes in the world, but as you can see, this one is pretty chill. So this was an awesome experience coming to the Ipswich Scales and Tails Festival. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing such beautiful snakes like this as much as I enjoyed showing them to you. How many miles did Brian travel on his recent Australian adventure? If you said C, 32,000 miles, you're 100% correct. Good job. So there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. What amazing animals there are down at the Australian reptile shows. And as always, I was tweeting and Facebooking my way through it. So make sure to follow me over at SnakeBytesTV. Until next week, you've been watching Snake Bites. The infamous kiss it on the head. Now I'm in trouble.